not an easy process. And I always encourage parents who are going through it to reach out to me because I know how overwhelming it can all be.
Absolutely. And for some kids, it might be college, it might be apprenticeship, college isn't for everyone, not even neurotypical children.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like how you're focusing on the experience of independence and untethering in that process, because if he learns how to live independently and he's managing his meds and managing his schoolwork, those are all functional skills for whatever is next.
Absolutely. And we called the first year away the year of Jack. Let's just see. And I will tell you, we dropped him off on a day in July. The whole family went. My oldest son sobbed. My oldest son and my husband, Joe, fell apart in the parking lot when Jack turned and walked away. And I write about that. I have a new book out called Half My Sky, and I write about that day. It's the epilogue to the book. The second day he was gone, he was in an Uber headed to a French fry place because it was National French Fry Day. And we were like, what do you mean you're in an Uber? He downloaded the app for himself, and and it was such a testament to me, although incredibly nerve-wracking. This kid was ready. He was ready to stretch his wings.
I got anxious right then thinking,
tell me about it.
Time you're like in the Uber or Lyft and it's like, whoa,
yeah.
Where are you going? And is it safe? Because that's like the thing. Everything is about, is it safe? And then there are calculated risks that have to be happened, right? Especially with a special needs child, you're like wanting to keep that nest safe, but there is exactly in the end of this, like, what does independence look like? And for some, it is outside the home. For some, it's an apartment within the home, right? There's so many different options, but whatever the independence looks like for that child, and being careful we're not in the way, because of my own anxiety, of my own fears, of my own worries about what could happen. Right? Again, you got to be safe. There's a calculated risk.
I love that. And no matter how much we thought we prepared him, we came upon some really big speed bumps. I'll share a story that will really get your heart racing. I say there's a duality in kids like my son, Jack. There's his physical age, and then there's his emotional age. We always parented the younger version. And that showed up as he came to us and said, I want to meet someone. I want to fall in love. I want to go on a dating app. And we said, no, this is when he was in his program. Absolutely not. You're not ready for that. You don't even know what that's about. No. Well, Jack did it. And he connected online with someone who he thought was a peer. And when they arranged to meet, it was two men. And they convinced him to get into their car and go take out money at the ATM. Mm. And that was a real low point of, again, what are we doing? That was, I will tell you, my husband's biggest fear going into this season of life. When I say we agreed to have Jack go to this program, I want to be honest that it was night after night of Joe and I on the couch. Is he ready? Are we ready? Sort of rehashing all of our anxieties surrounding it. And this is one that showed up for Joe over and over again. Somebody taking advantage of him, someone preying on him. It was such a low point. Jack called us that night screaming. He'd called the police officer. My husband talked to the officer. At that point, I thought, Jack, you're going to get arrested. You're so deregulated. You have got to calm down. And we are so grateful that they returned Jack unharmed. He never did take money out. And it was all, worked out as best as it could. And my husband, to his credit, says this was an opportunity for us. Somebody granted us, somebody in the universe, God, or whoever you want to say, gave us a fresh start with him. And to learn that we have to parent both. People on the spectrum, and sexuality is not a topic that's covered often, but it's real. They have the same needs and desires for intimacy that a neurotypical population has. The other thing it revealed to us is we had never spelled out safety when you're connecting online. I had the opportunity to talk to Jack's counselor because we have guardianship. And I talked to him the day after this happened. And I was like out of my mind. And I said to him, you never see me. Every time we talk, I'm like hysterical. And he said, I'm a counselor. I see people at their worst. And then I said, we told him over and over, this isn't how it's done. You don't meet people online. You don't do this. And the counselor's, I would say, in his 30s. And he said, but it is how people meet. It is absolutely how people meet these days. So again, an opportunity. We created a checklist for Jack. When you meet somebody, this is the list you go down. Phone is charged to 100%. You tell 5 people where you're going, always in a public place. No one should ask you for money or sexual favors upon a first encounter.
Or personal information.
So it was a chance to kind of deconstruct online dating and social media. And for me to learn that when kids connect online, they no longer think of that person as a stranger. They think they're familiar. They're friends even before they've even laid eyes on them. So we're grateful again that it was an opportunity where we could educate ourselves and him.
I'm just staying on that word opportunity because there's so many ways that could have gone sideways, or being kidnapped and all of those things. And that is, I think, every parent's worst fear, right? And because our kids are vulnerable and they're trusting, I usually share a story. Like I was trying to teach my daughter about stranger danger, right? And she was into these little stuffed animals. I forget what they were called at the time, that you would go on the computer or whatnot, webkins. And so I was like, okay, honey, like, what if you were in the park and, someone came up to you and say, and I see your little webcam and they say, I have a whole car full of webkins. You can come pick one out. What would you do? She's like, go pick one out.
Oh.
And I was like, no, that's not what we would do. What if they didn't have any? Well, I wouldn't know unless I went and looked in the trunk. It's like, well, see, honey, some people who are not kind people would see that you have a webkit and say, oh, that would be a way to start talking with her about your interest.
Yeah.
There might not even be a webkin. And her face was like, who would lie about webkins? And I was like, yes, there are people who would do that. There are liars about webkins that exist in the world.
And I don't know about your daughter, but Jack doesn't lie. Lying is not something he has learned since he's been away in college to withhold, right? Like going on the website, and he never shared that. But I think for them to understand that an adult would outright lie to you, it shatters some kind of myth that they have that people don't lie.
Right. And justice and fairness and what's right or wrong, because there's usually a very strong core piece of like justice and fairness.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And then a belief, until they become jaded, that adults are there to help, or adults would not do that. And I was talking with someone else in an interview earlier today. We were talking about cyber safety. And it was that thing, once they're familiar and they've shared a text, like all of a sudden this person is my friend, but this might not be a 19-year-old girl. It might be a 60-year-old man. And that concept, like, who would lie about that? Why would you pretend to be something you're not on a dating app?
Right.
Why would you be on the dating app unless you wanted to date? That doesn't make sense.
And I had so many messages after I shared about that. So many messages. Oh, my daughter cash apped all her money to someone she thought was her boyfriend. You're taking a vulnerable population who many of them long to belong. They long to be part of something and to be liked. And so it is an opening of sorts for people to take advantage of them. The other thing I think is really important to talk about is when Jack called us that night and was absolutely out of his mind, hysterical, shouting some really terrible things, it made me realize we don't educate kids like ours enough about how to behave around law enforcement. So my husband said, Jack, just put the police officer on. And the officer, he says, you're talking to my son, he has autism. And the officer said, I knew that. I knew that already. Thankfully, there had been some training in place. That is not the case everywhere. And, the stakes are high now. That's what I say all the time with a young adult on the spectrum. The stakes are very, very high. So I got in touch with his program and said, how can we introduce the, what law enforcement might look like, how helpful they can be. You want them to trust police, of course, but there is a way you do and don't behave around them so that you don't create a red flag. And so they brought in some officers to talk about techniques like, we're here to help you, but it's important that you breathe and that you try to give us the whole story, all of those elements to accepting help.
So that they don't see an aggressive 19-year-old, because you said he's 6'5".
He's
a very big dude.
He's a big
And when a
dude.
really big person is using a lot of body movements and is being loud, that looks aggressive versus anxious.
Understandably, he had within the first 3 months of his program, he got written up for misconduct because he went to his typical college space, so not in the residential space. His computer wasn't working, so he went to the IT department. And by nature, Jack is a mover. So he does self-stimulation or stimming. He paces, he rubs his hands together. He tends to he's at his face a lot. And by the time he got to the person at the IT department, he was already kind of running hot, right? At 11 or 12, and he was pacing around and he made other students uncomfortable. And so they wrote him up for misconduct. And it was eye-opening, like, autism, there's a point where it's not cute anymore. There's a point where it's not just quirky anymore. And there's a point where having his size will get in his way a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think this is a great point. If you are listening to this and you are law office, a law enforcer or ENT, I have a colleague actually named Dave Glick. He's with Triad Psych out of Atlanta, Georgia, and he trains police and neighborhood helpers, anyone that's going to be in contact with the community. He is a man on the spectrum who is a clinical social worker, who also has all of this training available. He does a lot of work with the police and law enforcement as special agents. So if you're looking for someone, I'm going to give a shout out to Dave Glick, because that is something that is becoming an issue. We have this generation now who are in their 20s and older, right? From when the diagnostic criteria changed in the 90s, and they are young adults now. And so we need to know, what does that look like when someone is anxious versus actually being aggressive, and how to approach. Because I remember one time I was in a movie theater. It wasn't my child, but when you're an autism mom, you sense other.
They're all your child.
Yeah. And I remember we were at a movie theater. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was the Pirates of the Caribbean, one of them. And I hear what I know is an autism meltdown out in the lobby. And except for as I'm watching it, mom doesn't know her child's on the spectrum. And so they were leaving Pirates of the Caribbean 15 minutes early. And she was telling the police officer was starting to approach. And I was just standing in the back, kind of waving him off just to keep distance. Just stay back, ask questions from afar. And I was like, stand up, motioning him to stay standing, like, don't get down and move and approach. Stay standing, keep talking. I was like, ask questions about the movie. What do you love about the movie?
Right.
Why do you love Pirates of the Caribbean so much? Why is it so hard to leave, to just stop that cycle of, I want to go home, I want to go back, I want to go back, I want to go back, because like Dan's like, nobody else in the theater budged. And I was like, well, my radar.
I know that.
And then when I heard a male voice, I was like, could that be security or an officer? This could go really scary for this child really quick. And I remember asking the mom, something about the movie. She's like, this is his 12th time seeing it. I just don't understand why he has to see the last 15 minutes. I was like, okay, I can't diagnose this child right here.
Right.
But I was like, but it sounds like this is something really important to him. And probably he doesn't like change, and probably he likes to finish things. And she's like, yes. I was like, you could talk to your school about that, or talk to your doctor.
Yeah.
That. But the officer was like, I didn't know what to do. He's like, I was thinking of grabbing him. And I was like, no.
Oh, dear.
You would have definitely gotten hit or kicked, and that would have escalated this, because he was also a larger child, because he would have gone into put him on the ground and put your hands behind your back kind of a thing. So we chatted, and it was just like a little moment. He's like, we don't know how to do these things. Someone called 911 and we showed up, and this is what I'm seeing is, this child pacing and refusing to leave. And that could have gotten very scary very quick. And your Jack is an adult with 14 size shoes. That's a big guy.
It's a big deal. Another option is to register your kiddo with the local police department, so that if something came up, or they got, Jack doesn't drive, but if you have a driver and they get stopped, it'll show up that this is a person diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. We come up against those things raising a young adult all the time. We were visiting him about 2 months ago, and we're walking down the street, and this is so on brand for Jack. He pushed ahead of a woman pushing a stroller. or he wanted to go into the ice cream, Ben and Jerry's, and he sort of like bombed in front of the person who was opening the door. So constantly we're learning of all these small aspects of life that we have to start helping him put together.
Well, as we're kind of wrapping up today, people certainly can Google your name and find your books, but do you have a website or other resources? As you mentioned, like, look at my stack page. How could people like, okay, well, how do I find her? Because I want to ask her this question or look at her resources.
Yeah. So I have a website, carriecariello.com. I post there every Monday a new essay, and it's kind of like real time, something that's happened during the week related to autism or marriage or the messiness that is building a family. I'm also on Substack. That's my resource driven page where it's like how to find a program. This week, I covered the IEP table, how to get through the IEP meetings. And then my Facebook page is that we have a really great active community over there. And I go live there once a week, and that's Carrie Cariello. And it's the same on Instagram.
All right. Well, as we're finishing up today, all the different things we talked about, what's a drive home point or a takeaway, or listener, I really hope you heard what?
Well, I didn't get a chance to say the words, but I want to say them now to anybody listening on this bumpy, ordinary autism journey. You are not alone.
That's my tagline.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like we're already together. You're not alone. Community is so important. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what the resource is, thank goodness for Google.
Oh my gosh, right?
And moms like us who are now raising young adults and in that independent phase, look for moms who are a little bit more veteran along the journey. Because most of us don't want someone else to have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Most of us don't want you to have to go through some of the things that we went through a decade or two ago. And so you'll find if you're willing to look and ask for help, I think.
Yeah, I always wanted that older mom when Jack was little, like somebody ahead of me. And now I just feel a real responsibility to be that when I can.
I tell people I decided to become the resource I didn't have.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So thank you so much for being on the show. And listeners, I'll tell you again, there is hope for your future and you're not alone on this journey.